online. With so much shopping now shifting online, having these self-install options is even more important to trigger sales, and with a smart speaker, companies can deliver support through Do It With Me or Do It Together services that utilize real-time chat. We are excited to share more of our research at our upcoming events and look forward to seeing you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first track today. And it is titled AI and the Smart Home, Proactive and Predictive Intelligence, where we want to examine just the opportunities for leveraging AI sort of to drive that innovation in the smart home, and also to look at some of the key considerations and lessons learned from the previous generations of AI-powered products and systems that have been launched. I'm Patrice Samuels, Senior Analyst at Parks Associates. Of course, before we launch, I do want to take some time to thank our sponsors. They're all represented here on the slide, and I just want them to know that we really appreciate their contribution to making this event a success and all our previous events that we've had in the past, both in person and virtual. So thank you very much. We would like to kick off this track with some analyst insights, of course, and then we'll have some visionary insights from Rich Cacioppo from Front Door Home. And he will have a presentation titled Realizing the Promise of AI and Putting Insights to Work. And then, of course, after Rich's presentation, that will lead into our interactive panel discussion that we'll have later on. And then we'll tie it all up with a networking session on Zoom. And that will be titled The Promises and Pitfalls of AI for a Smarter Home. Right. So we're talking about AI and the smart home because most believe that AI is going to be a critical part of the smart home evolution. AI, has the potential really to expand the device capabilities and improve their value propositions. And it also has the potential to enhance customer experiences by, primarily through creating greater automation, which of course leads to greater, convenience and that kind of thing. Now, one of the reasons for wanting to improve the value proposition of the smart home is, of course, to drive product or market adoption of these products. Now, as you can see from the chart here, the smart home industry has experienced sort of a moderate but consistent growth over the past 4 years. You can see where adoption of at least one smart home device or appliance increased from 26% in 2017 to 30% in 2020. However, what we know is that adoption of individual devices has not moved far beyond, that 10% mark, which is, barely into that early adopter segment. Smart thermostats represent the best-selling category here. We see where 11% of broadband households now report owning a smart thermostat. And of course, we know, and we've mentioned it before, that smart thermostats have really benefited from a push from the electricity providers and other utilities that have sort of integrated them into their energy efficiency and demand response programs over the years. Now, smart cameras also have a relatively high adoption among smart home devices, and we know that their use among home security companies have really helped to drive this. So we see where a number of different industries have really started to take advantage of AI capabilities, and which in many cases are not only helping to drive market appeal, but it's reducing operational costs as well for those providers. So what we're seeing in the security systems industry, for one, is that nearly 70% of security system owners already have some level of interactivity for their system. And that is, of course, through the ability to access and control the system using a computer, tablet, or smartphone or smart speaker. And we see where DIY solutions that leverage smart devices are also capturing a growing share of it's 73% of households that do not own a professionally monitored system already. So smart devices are really being embraced in this space, and it's going to drive our ability to take advantage of AI-based solutions, pardon me. And AI is also helping to drive additional benefits. So we have some listed here. So for one, it supports more intelligent alerts. Now, leveraging video analytics is allowing system owners to get alerts for the things that they actually want while ruling out other things. So they might opt for person-only alerts, or alerts only within a specific zone or a specific area, or even alerts for unknown persons or unknown things only. So no alerts once the camera recognizes whoever or whatever is in the frame. Now, AI is also helping to reduce false alerts. Now, there is a lot more verification that is going into determining whether alarm represents an actual threat, and video analytics is helping that. Now, this is saving service providers from having to send responses to false alerts, and it's also benefiting the consumer as well, who might not have to pay for a false alert fee. Improved response times is another benefit. So AI is, of course, reducing the times necessary to verify an event, and it can confirm the presence of an unusual person or sound or vehicle. So smart cameras are one of the primary smart devices being leveraged in the security space, and these cameras are leveraging a lot of video and as well as audio analytic solutions to add value and improve the services. Now, video analytics is allowing owners to identify a number of things: persons, objects, animals, packages, license plates, and other subjects of interest that might be visible in the frame. And of course, a lot can be independently identified by these devices now. But of course, these AI use cases are consistently evolving, and we've seen a lot of evolution since smart camera manufacturers started building these capabilities into their products. It kind of started with the emergence of the ability to distinguish among different causes of motion. And then, of course, that moved into, being able to search images in the frame. Then there's distinguishing between people and pets, and, identifying particular zones or perimeters. Tracking objects is kind of where it's going now too. And detecting attempts to tamper with the camera is also now a capability. Facial recognition is being built into a lot of products now too. And even identifying the make, model, or even color of cars, as well as license plate numbers. These are all factors, that have been established and consistently being developed and added to new brands that are emerging in the space. Now, we have a number of established brands that are offering these capabilities, and of course, those include Nest, Ring, Netatmo, Logitech, Netgear, and Panasonic. Now, leveraging audio analytics is a little more recent. Audio analytics can help to identify things like glass breaking, dogs barking, doors and windows opening, crashing or banging in the home, those kinds of things, device alarms, screaming, that kind of thing, as well as some safety features such as smoke alarms or even oven timers. It can be picked up through a lot of audio analytics technologies. And there are also a few brands that have started building these capabilities into their solutions, including the Nest speakers and displays can actually now let you know when glass is breaking or that your smoke alarm is going off. And Vivint also had a firefighter listening device that detects smoke alarms and sort of relays alerts to users and monitoring stations. And their audio analytics capabilities built into additional devices such as the remote link from KID and Leo Smart Alert, the Leo Smart Alert Nightlight. Centrica also launched the Hive Hub 360. It's a smart hub that includes audio listening technology that can recognize the sound of smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, or dogs barking, or windows being broken, etc. Now, Of course, there's a lot of potential for video and audio analytics, and we do expect, we've seen a lot of evolution already, but we do expect this to evolve further. And some of the ways in which we expect it to evolve include through the detection of alerts and anomalies. So kind of what I was talking about before, just, a little more advanced. So rather than, detecting motion, we're detecting motion at, say, unusual times, and rather than identifying all activity, it will identify activities in sort of unusual spaces, for example. And then situational intelligence, that's also starting to emerge, where through an analysis of the different objects and actions in the frame, a camera will be able to recognize the particular situation, and an example of that might be recognizing a delivery being made, for example. All right, home automation. Now, in this space, that is where we're starting to see a lot of the personalization and prediction, where AI-powered analytics are applied to repetitive patterns of daily life. So what we're finding now is that US broadband households now have an average of 2 smart home devices. But among smart home device owners, we're now seeing where they're averaging 6.8 devices. And again, this is creating a significant opportunity for leveraging home automation solutions. So the smart home applications here will learn the occupants' routines. That's kind of the basis, and it will make recommendations for automated sequences such as creating an away mode or an arrival mode that can be recommended. So the AI will probably learn, for example, that after a customer enters the home, what they typically do is to turn on the lights and adjust the thermostats. So the AI solution will then, make a recommendation to create an arrival scene or mode that automates those actions on the consumer's behalf. Similarly, for personalizing settings, knowing which occupant is home can be used as a trigger to trigger their preferences, for example, lighting or temperature or entertainment. And for some, this would be enabled by using geofencing technologies and the consumer's smartphone to identify the user, but there are, of course, other technologies that can help identify the user as well. Now, Vivid, for example, has an AI solution that leverages data from sensors, mobile devices, and the use of its system. And this now enables it to make intelligent recommendations to add just different conveniences to the whole smart home experience. People Power as well also has software that applies machine learning to various established smart home use cases within the home. So the primary value here of home automation is that it's really improving the user experience in the home. And it's really doing a lot of that by reducing effort and driving convenience. Now, predictive maintenance represents another area in which we think AI can provide strong value in the home, especially as it relates to products in the home that maybe costly to repair or replace, such as appliances and perhaps HVAC systems. Now, LG has made significant progress here, and it has added its ThinQ artificial intelligence capabilities to all its products. And what this does is that it enables self-diagnostics from the appliance itself. Now, the company claims that the AI can actually detect maintenance issues, well before, it even manifests itself into a problem that the owner can recognize. Now, when these problems get diagnosed, they will automatically, of course, notify the user of the problem so they can address those issues, before they actually become a bigger problem that might be more costly to address. Now, the connected health space is another area where we expect AI to truly drive innovation. Right now, we have 42% of US broadband households owning at least one connected health device. And we have 26% who report owning two or more of these devices. Now, the overarching role of AI here is in the ability to detect health conditions. That would be a very important value proposition. Interpreting health data coming from the user, that's also very useful. And acting on health needs, and of course, learning from health responses. Now, the type of data that we can leverage here includes data on vital signs. You know, it's a wealth of different data that can be used here in the different AI solutions. So daily behavioral activity, of course, dietary habits, medication compliance, medical history, and test results. All those factors will go into helping us to enable use cases in remote monitoring or chronic healthcare management. So we can definitely, one of the areas in which we're seeing that we can, leverage a lot of this data is, of course, in remote patient monitoring. And remote patient monitoring has the potential to save consumers a lot in medical bills. So you can already see the value here emerging in throughout broadband households. Now, the data captured can provide insights on, ongoing health, or it can support just the daily management of diseases, or it enable rapid intervention, which of course we know can mean the difference between a devastating condition and a situation that doesn't progress into a situation that's too bad. And patient care, of course, and one might even say it enables proactive care, where we're able to address issues before they manifest into something bad. Now, overall, it promotes better medical outcomes at lower costs, and also it enables predictive modeling for illness progression. So through the systematic collection of data and analysis, it's really, the promise is that it will really help us to get a better understanding of how different illnesses will progress. And of course, what that will do is to give us a chance to take advantage of, or take the necessary measures then to avoid those undesirable outcomes. Now, along with remote patient monitoring, independent living and chronic disease management, as I mentioned before, are additional benefits of AI in home healthcare. Now, we have data showing that 21% of Americans will be over 65 by 2030, pardon me. And we know that a growing number of this age group find it very important to live independently in their own homes. We also have 20% of US broadband households who identify as current or future caregivers. So many of these consumers will also find these solutions very helpful. Now, IBM Watson has a range of healthcare initiatives, from cancer diagnosis to personalized treatment plan. And so they're one of the companies that have really started to leverage AI to facilitate, chronic disease management and just, aging in place. Now, AI is also going to be used in chronic disease management, as I mentioned before. 60% of US households, 60% of US adults have a chronic condition, and 40% have two or more. Now, we also have companies like Medtronic, who have been developing AI tools to help manage conditions like diabetes. So we have Medtronic, we have Apple as well, who's been in the space doing a lot of work. So we have a lot of companies that have really started to leverage a lot of the data points that I mentioned before, both from the consumer and from their devices, and are really building AI solutions that can really help to improve healthcare and really remote patient management and chronic disease management. So I am going to stop here. And I'm looking to see if I have received any questions so far from the audience. And it seems like there have been no questions so far. Okay, all right. Finally, they're popping up. All right, the first question is a healthcare device a medical device, or does it include things like scales, sleep devices, etc.? Okay, great question. So at Parks Associates, and our definition, of course, might be different from how it's being defined by other research companies in the industry, et cetera. But at Parks Associates, we divide our healthcare devices into medical devices and fitness devices. So medical devices would include your glucometer, devices that facilitate, diabetes care, hypertension, oximeters, that kind of thing. Whereas the sleep devices and the scales that you mentioned here in your question would fall under the connected wellness devices. So it's medical and wellness devices and fitness devices, pardon me, is also another area that we study and we categorize these products into. Are there any other questions? I'm trying to see if there were any other popping up here. All right, it seems like we don't have any other questions so far. So, okay, wonderful. All right, so we're gonna go ahead then and make the transition to our visionary speaker. Now, our visionary speaker is gonna be Rich Cacioppo from Front Door Home. And Rich will be speaking on realizing the promise of AI and putting insights to work. And of course, Rich will take about 20 minutes to make his presentation, show a couple of videos, and then he will be taking some questions at the end. So importantly, start entering your questions as soon as they emerge, because as Elizabeth mentioned in the intro, the questions that are most upvoted would be the ones that are most likely to be taken. And I'm sure Rich's presentation will be very interesting, so try to get your questions in early. And with that, I will invite Rich to take over and start presenting.
Great, thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. For putting AI insights to work, I'm here today to talk about the importance I believe that augmented reality is going to have to realize the promise of AI in the home. As Patrice said, my name is Rich Cacioppo. I am the VP of Product Management and Emerging Businesses at Front Door. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Front Door, our mission is pretty simple. It's to take the hassle out of home ownership. We're the largest provider of home service plans in the US and have fulfilled over 65 million service requests. And we're powered by a nationwide network of over 17,000 qualified contractor firms and 60,000 professional service technicians. And we're also now offering on-demand solutions to customers in 35 US cities. Beyond our current businesses, we've also recognized that when applied to solve real customer problems, technology can deliver world-class service and experiences. So in December 2019, we acquired Stream, a company that uses AR and AI with another simple mission, to make the world's expertise more accessible to all. And through video, AR collaboration, and spatial AI, we believe that Stream is going to revolutionize how customers engage with and care for their home. One upfront disclosure about me, I am neither a data scientist nor an engineer. I was a history major in college. I am often in awe of the current and former colleagues from these fields that I've worked with and have learned so much from them. What I do think I bring to this discussion today is a perspective on working backwards from customer problems and identifying where technology can drive meaningful value versus tech for tech's sake, specifically in areas that have informed my views on AR and AI. Things like building experiences for Apple Retail and the first Amazon Go store, where you're applying tech in a physical world where intention and reality often collide in unexpected ways. Working with early stage tech like the early software builds on the first Echo device, where while very few things go right, you find those pieces and moments of delight and value that continues to drive curiosity and exploration. And then especially on the data science and AI side, partnering with applied and research scientists on large data sets and computer vision in the health and wellness vertical. And I think it was there where I developed a real appreciation for not just the science, but the art involved in AI, and also the importance of customer-obsessed view on privacy and that being a core part of the value proposition. I think all of those things have kind of informed what I'd like to talk to today about where I think augmented reality is going for the home. And so 77 is the number of IoT devices in my smart home right now. At least that is what my Eero tells me. This is not a talk about hype versus reality of IoT and an AI-enabled home. As Patrice noted, I think we have crossed the Rubicon here. AI is beginning to drive real value, albeit primarily with structured data sets. And there are challenges that clearly remain that I'm sure others will speak to: utility, ease of use, interoperability, and privacy. But I do think we're beginning to see some really meaningful integrations with structured data that do improve lives. I did want to highlight 3 examples from my own smart home to start. On the left, my mainline water sensor a few weeks ago identified abnormal activity. My kids, I've got 3 young boys, were out in the backyard and they left the spigot on while filling up water guns. Using AI, it was able to let me know that this was abnormal and I could identify the problem. In the middle, my thermostat uses occupancy sensors to build a smart schedule for heating and cooling my home, maximizing my energy savings and also letting me know if it sees something that might be wrong based on the effort required to cool a given zone in my house. And then on the right, Alexa hunches, right? Using smart home data, it learns my pattern of behavior across lights, locks, plugs, switches. And if Alexa notices something unusual, like a door left unlocked at night, she'll let me know. And at Front Door, particularly when we think about structured data sets, we're experimenting with AI techniques as well to bring value to homeowners and contractors. We're beginning to work with both rules-based or expert systems models that have significant explanatory power, as well as predictive deep learning models. Leveraging our historical service request data, IoT, and a human-AI partnership. It's very early days for us, but we're excited about what the future may bring. And just a couple of examples of how we're approaching customer problems here. Vendor selection. How do we get the best outcome for customers by using AI to pick the optimal contractor? Repair versus replace. In this human and AI partnership, how do we make faster and better decisions on repairing or replacing a system or appliance in a home? And then finally, predictive service. How do we marry IoT data about a specific asset with larger data sets that we have to move beyond fix-on-fail scenarios for customers? But all that said, there is something that's largely missing from AI in the home today. So if I go back to my water sensor example for a moment, this is the back wall of my home next to that spigot. My eye caught this series of plaster cracks on the wall. And we moved to Memphis about 2 years ago and bought a house last spring. And when we were making the decision, they did a survey to ensure there's no foundational damage because there were some existing cracks. We were encouraged to keep an eye on them, quote unquote, to see if they extended or expanded. And as I was turning off the spigot and I looked, I had to ask myself the question a few months in, had they? I hadn't thought of them since we moved in, and now I was kicking myself for not keeping better track of whether there was a change there. I like to think as a homeowner, I'm pretty responsible when it comes to my largest investment, but for many of us, it's often out of sight, out of mind. And one of the things we are really missing today is that unstructured context for how things have changed over time and how they could change in the future. And I think what's critical for us to keep in mind as we have this discussion and talk through how we build value for customers is the AI flywheel. I'm sure most of you are familiar with some form of this, but effectively the flywheel is more data allows us to build better models with tagging and learning, creating a better CX for customers, which drives more usage. And the more usage that there is, the more data there is to collect and continue this flywheel or virtuous cycle. Now, while the current model that we have for IoT and AI does feed this flywheel, there are a few things that it still often requires. A lot of proactive customer intent, willingness to tinker. And when you're limited primarily to structured data, that in reality represents a fraction of the meaningful inputs and the things that are happening in the home. So at the heart of this conversation is my belief that AR will realize the full promise of AI and that the home will be one of the most compelling proving grounds and value propositions for customers. So I'd like to take a couple minutes now just to talk about AR and how I think there's a common perception of AR and where we believe it's going. Many of you are probably familiar with this. Pokemon Go is a great example of the perception of AR pushing dumb content into the world. And Pokemon Go may be the most famous example, but in my household right now, it's Jurassic World Alive with daily dino checks around the neighborhood. And this has its place, and this has helped pressure test and improve the technology. But there is so much more for us to consider when we think about the value that AR can bring to AI and to customers. So what you're seeing right now is an experience that's in the wild today, where Stream is connecting advisors and customers on kitchen remodels. What you're seeing right now is a depth mapping of physical space. A customer using an iPad Pro with a LiDAR sensor to capture that full digital twin virtual version of the kitchen. And here you'll see also, because of that depth mapping, the ability to take precise measurements, move around in three-dimensional space, and now modify the space or augment that digital world with other objects. And this digital twin that's being created and you're seeing manipulated is really the beginning of the spatial web, or Web 3.0, and will truly have a profound impact on how we engage with AI in the future. So when we think about the AI flywheel and then we overlay that with augmented reality, I think a critical point is that AR is poised to extract context about the world around us, pulling that content out at an unprecedented scale. And that is the amount of data and context and sensor fusion that's going to spin that flywheel faster than ever before. And so when we think about the areas of AR that will drive that and spin that flywheel, there are a couple of categories. A lot of what we've talked about and see today is IoT and that structured data. Those are all jumping off points for AI-driven value-add experience for customers without question. The second category are really these proactive AR engagements that are going to jumpstart unstructured data context, annotation, and solutions. So the example that we just saw of that kitchen concierge experience, as well as things like DIY remote support, and as Patrice mentioned as well, do it with me home solutions. How do you use those proactive engagements to build up that data set for annotating things for the future? Most critical from a customer adoption perspective, I would say, is the new surfaces for augmented reality, particularly hands-free glasses and maybe personal drones. These will provide the opportunity to dramatically increase usage, data collection, and drive those sensor fusion inputs, visual, auditory, gesture, all of which that can be signals to improve AI models. And then, the last broad category encompasses a few different concepts. The dedicated device processing power that we're seeing on mobile handsets and other personal devices, plus 5G, plus edge computing, will all provide that horsepower that we need to drive a seamless CX and in-the-moment value. And when I think about how critical, especially 5G and edge computing will be here, it reminds me a little bit of 2008, 2009, right after the first iPhone came out, and the competition from other smartphone manufacturers, and the Palm Pre comes to mind. Palm Pre and WebOS was a phenomenal operating system. What really hurt Palm Pre and the WebOS was the latency of the touchscreen experience. compared to the fluidity of even the early iPhones. And when we think about that adoption in augmented reality, it is really going to come down to how seamless and how fluid that CX is for customers. And we'll come back to that point a little bit later as well. Now, I mentioned a little bit about the spatial web. The spatial web is a full digital reconstruction of the physical world. These digital twins will create highly interactive contextual overlays across every daily experience. It's my belief that the home is the ideal proving ground. There will be a long journey to learn our way into this online merge, offline or OMO world. And quality, consistency, and quantity of data on the same environment is going to be critical to build great experiences. So the home is an ideal place for that, given the frequency of experience from a small group of individuals. As you think about passive AR data, it will collect that data on the same environment as it changes, helping to identify changes over time, imagine how environments could be redesigned, and provide just-in-time relevant information. And as we think about homeowner and virtual expert annotation above this, the frequency of those annotations and contexts will improve AI models as well. So I think another key point for us to consider is the role AR will play in integrating or surfacing AI for customers. I believe AR is going to become the UI for artificial intelligence across our lives, and that the home is positioned to be a focal point up front. I'm reminded a bit of a Sherlock Holmes quote, "I'm a brain, Watson. The rest of me is a mere appendix." And that's really what AI is. But as AI informs more of our daily lives and that spatial web footprint grows, by default, augmented reality is going to become the primary UI for how we engage with all of this intelligence. So going back to my plaster crack example, while turning off the spigot, imagine a UI while I'm wearing my smart glasses that intuits and just knows that this is a crack and that over the past 5 months, it's increased in width. This is just one example of how passive data collection, annotation, and then smart models can provide that just-in-time information for me as a homeowner. If the home is a core starting point for the spatial web, then by default, augmented reality UI will be highly informed by some of these home use cases. Those include things like surfacing contextual information by time, space, need, and profile, showing those changes over time, which I often compare to how computer vision is envisioned to work in the health and wellness space. And that just-in-time contextual UI has a significant role to play in driving behaviors. As I mentioned, while homes are our largest investments, many homeowners don't know what to do to take care of their home, when to do it, and why it matters. And there's data suggests that every $1 spent on home maintenance saves up to $100 in repair costs. And so if we think about the behavioral changes that are possible by intuiting and providing just-in-time information for homeowners, we have an opportunity to drive a completely different relationship between customers and their homes. And then I think that the third point I'll make here around the importance of AR to drive this value for artificial intelligence is the home is the proving ground for the intersection of data privacy and customer value as AR and AI evolve together. Privacy is undoubtedly critical for augmented reality. And this raises questions around user-owned data, decentralized data and computing with blockchain. And the home is one of the places where we value privacy the most. However, I think one of the interesting things to consider is the concept of the privacy paradox, and how that might lend itself to AR's growth in the home before a proliferation of AR occurs outside it. So the privacy paradox basically is 2 points. One is that people are aware and care deeply about privacy risks, but their behavior does not always match those viewpoints. And the second, which is in some ways counterintuitive, is that people tend to over-index on the privacy of other people rather than themselves. So if we think about some of the challenges with augmented reality in public in the past, given the potential for AR in public to drive negative reactions from others, or have their own privacy put at risk by others, AR in the home, in some ways akin to the growth of smart speakers and assistants in the home, may in fact be where we gain traction first and start to develop the paradigms that will extend outside the home in the future. And I think specifically for the home, one mental model to think through is, if you consider ownership in the spatial web. A customer owns their physical home. Why shouldn't they own its digital twin and who they open their virtual door to? And so this idea of the merging of the physical digital worlds and what ownership looks like in that future state, I think are some of the key questions that we're going to face with the home and augmented reality in the years ahead. So finally, just a couple examples of what could be. We've talked a lot about maintenance, and we've talked, about those fix on fails or those in the moment solutions for customers. But there's a lot that's possible further up funnel in the home purchase process. So imagine dynamic augmented staging for customers. Prospective buyers can walk into a house and reimagine what it would look like with wood floors, different paint colors, et cetera, creating more opportunities to drive interest and engagement in a home. Continuous home inspection. As we've talked about tracking changes over time, using IoT, service histories, and this unstructured data to help homeowners prioritize maintenance tasks and provide timely context. Water damage, personal drone roof analysis, thermal imaging for insulation in the future, visualizing what will happen if you don't do anything. And again, I go back to the health and wellness space where some of the most successful smoking cessation campaigns were around showing somebody what their face will look like if they keep smoking over the next 20 years. I think there are opportunities for us to use AI and AR together to do similar things in the home. And then finally, the idea of emergency support. Walking past a dishwasher, and while your eye may not catch it, AR may see leaking water pooling. How does that work on its own or in conjunction with IoT water leak sensors? How do you then use AR to pull up appropriate steps to avoid water damage, DIY tips, and remote support on demand? And so that's really at the heart of this. And coming back to the UI piece for a moment, I think it was Roger Ebert who talked about movies as the empathy machine. For you to imagine yourself in the life of someone else, or imagine how you would solve an issue or address a problem for someone. And there's been a lot more talk about VR and AR as the future of empathy machines. And I think with the home, given both the financial importance that it has to us, as well as the emotional significance, AR is truly going to drive a level of engagement in the home that we have not seen before. So that's it for me. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, so I have a lot of questions. It seems there's a lot of interest in that mapping app that you mentioned. So I'm actually going to lump a couple of these questions together because they're kind of related to the same thing. So is that spatial mapping app currently available? And the second one is this depth mapping live on Stream now?
So this depth mapping is available with a subset of Stream's partners who are using it with real customers in the world today. So this is actual product that is out being used with B2B partners.
Wonderful. All right, so this next question is, how do you plan to expand appliance recognition data over time? And the second part of that question, what additional features will you add?
Mm-hmm. So from an appliance recognition standpoint, if I'm interpreting the question correctly, there's multiple ways to approach it. One way is in partnership with OEMs to get effectively CAD data in order to map that and match. The other is to use computer vision and imagery mapped with product label data capture through OCR. So you match those over time. So you can both use the structured data and the unstructured data to build out that recognition of specific models of appliances, for example. I think there's a vision of a future state where it is just known when you walk past this given refrigerator, what the model is of that refrigerator, what its features and functionalities are. That is very much part of the data collection piece that will be an ongoing effort in this space.
Got it. Okay. Do you see AI being used for predictive maintenance in either rooftop solar or HVAC spaces?
Absolutely. I think this comes to the heart of where we're already seeing success in the space with structured data. And it's still early days, but I think IoT has a huge role to play, at least when we think about the HVAC and the appliance space. Where unstructured data can help in those areas is to inform or add more data. So an example that I would give is, I could be walking by my dishwasher, and the IoT capabilities of that dishwasher might not detect that something's wrong yet, but the auditory cue that might be picked up could be a leading indicator of what we might see from the structured data in the future. With the example of the roof, that is clearly an unstructured computer vision data problem. So I think that is about data collection, human and AI partnership on annotation, and then ultimately using deep learning models in order to predict when something may go wrong. But I think all of these examples outside of where we have structured data collected and we have instrumented data, this is where augmented reality and computer vision will be instrumental.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How has Front Door used AI to serve home warranty customers and improved repair or replace decisions?
Yeah. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about how we're using that today, other than the examples that I gave earlier in the conversation are the areas of research and experimentation for us.
Okay. Okay, one more here. At this time, is ownership of the digital twin of your home something that has been addressed by privacy policies, regulation, or legislation? That data is very valuable. What does, for example, Roomba say?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Right.
I think we have proxies that we can look in other verticals. I think HIPAA and your distinction earlier, Patrice, between medical data and fitness or personal data is an apt one. But I think that's a space that we can look to as we inform. But we are on the edge with the spatial web. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to take a customer-obsessed viewpoint. And I stand by the idea that in the world of the spatial web and the digital twin, a homeowner of their physical home should also own the virtual home that they would open their door to somebody.
Makes sense. All right. So next one, acceptance/adoption seems like it will be a big challenge. I agree. Okay, so similar to VR and AR in general, outside of specific use cases, what do you see will be the catalysts for wide adoption?
Mm-hmm. I think, frankly, it's consumer electronics hardware manufacturers delivering an experience that, in a V1 will offer a few of those delightful moments that brings on early adopters. I think there have been challenges with consumer AR in the past. I anticipate that some of those will be addressed in the coming years. But as I noted in one of the 5 core prerequisites for us to deliver against this, there has to be a killer hardware experience that customers love. I think we have sufficient examples coming out of the smartphone era into the smartwatch era of that adoption curve accelerating with peripherals, with the smartphone still at the core. And I could imagine that wearable augmented reality, as well as potentially personal drones, are the 2 areas where we'll see those killer features that inspire customers to use them.
Interesting. And also, certainly, I mean, we know that price is an issue for a lot of consumers as well. So as soon as, we're able to produce things more affordably and get the prices down, that will certainly help to drive adoption as well. We talked a lot yesterday about a lot of the interoperability and just technical challenges and the fact that consumers think that these will somehow create more problems, more technical problems in the home than the benefits that they will create. So certainly as soon as we as an industry do more to just sort of get rid of those or minimize those technical challenges and create those experiences to what you mentioned, that will really, drive that consumer confidence in the products and drive adoption.
All right. I would just add that I think, the work among some of the largest tech companies around standardization of interoperability, chips and work that's happening there, I think will help reduce some of that friction. But I fully concede that as we start folding in more unstructured data and this idea of a digital twin, that's a whole new layer of interoperability that we have to consider.
That's concerned. Okay, let me just make one last check to make sure we got all the questions. Okay, one more, but we do have a little bit of time. Okay. Can you imagine a means whereby AI/AR can help provide a roadmap for best securing your home?
I can. Like all of these, there is a human AI partnership. And so when we think about a human expert doing that, providing a walkthrough of your home and doing that recommendation, that is something that over time could increasingly be delivered through artificial intelligence with an AR overlay. So, the possibilities here are endless. I think what I'd leave on this one with is, to my point earlier about tech for tech's sake, we have to start from where are the real customer problems and pain points. And we could build all these amazing scenarios of what we could do, but as long as we stay rooted in where the biggest customer problems are, the data opportunities will be there.
Thank you. And with that, we will close. Thank you so much for those insights. I think that was a really, really, as I mentioned before, the definition of a visionary insights presentation, really helping us to see beyond, AI and see how AI can really be, melded into the situation to drive a lot of what we're talking about forward and adding value to the smart home experience in general. So thank you very much again, Rich. And with that, we are going to transition into our panel discussion. So we'll take a quick break and then our panelists will get queued up and then we'll get into the introductions and our discussion. So see you in a minute. Okay, welcome back. And we are about to get started with our panel discussion titled AI in the Smart Home, Proactive and Predictive Intelligence. Now we have a great group of panelists lined up to present here now, and we're going to have them make some brief introductions. And after the introductions, we're going to go right on into the panel discussions, and then we'll make some time afterwards for your questions. So again, as always, do get your questions queued up. Also, throughout our discussion, we'll have some polling questions that we will be asking, and you can find those to the right of your screen right now under the tab that says polls. We're going to be asking you to do those polls, and then we'll sort of integrate your responses throughout our discussion. So with that, we'll get into our introductions, and we're going to go ahead and kick it off with Mitchell. So Mitchell, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, greetings, and thank you, Patrice. And I'm the executive director of the Z-Wave Alliance. Also, I'm the director of strategic partnerships IoT at Silicon Labs. You're probably familiar with Z-Wave, but real quickly, some news that just was announced. As of mid-August, the Z-Wave and Z-Wave Alliance has spun off into a fully independent standards organization. That is a pretty big deal, and I'm happy to chat with anyone to talk about that in the future. Z-Wave, as you know, has dominated the market, the smart home marketplace, certainly in the security area, with well over 800 devices that have already been certified for S2 security. We're actually addressing easy commissioning with the launch of Smart Start a couple of years ago, and we've already got over 250 devices that are utilizing that to make things easy. Anyway, there's a whole lot more to talk about. I don't want to dominate the stage here on Z-Wave, but let's just say that if you're not working with Z-Wave, let's talk. We'll probably want to talk about that.
All right, thank you, Mitchell. And now we'll be moving on to Dave. Dave from Alula. Can you take it away, Dave?
All right. Great day, everybody. I guess I don't know what time zone you're in, so I'll just open with that. So I run product management here at Alula, and Alula is a company that provides interactive services for professional security dealers, mostly across North America. And I think Patrice, in your opening and in Rich's dialogue, we found the world of AI and the world of connected devices is evolving, and the data that we're capturing from this is evolving as well. And we're all about trying to bring value around connected homes and connected businesses back to consumers leveraging this technology. And while we service the professional industry, I think we're finding the world of connected devices is becoming a mixture of professionally installed as well as do-it-yourself and other technologies. They all become interrelated. Alula is about delivering interactive experiences that can leverage security systems that already exist in the home. We can add our services, our equipment, our touchscreens to security systems that have been installed for decades. We also can interoperate with Z-Wave, that was just presented prior, as well as a broad range of other devices that are going to exist in the home, bring that through a complete interactive experience, and then through that, we can start to add more layers of intelligence onto that, leveraging the data and bringing more value to consumers. So looking forward to the dialogue here, and I really appreciated the opening session in advance of this, because I think that's going to help feed a lot of good chatter amongst the panel here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dave. And now we'll hear from Steve. Steve, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Steve Teig. I'm the CEO of Perceive. And Perceive's whole agenda is to upgrade the idea of sensors into perceivers. That is, where sensors just hand you pixels or hand you audio, but they have no idea what they're looking at, what they're listening to. We see a way to fix that, to put so much horsepower with our Ergo chip right next to the sensor that every sensor can understand what it's looking at, what it's listening to, what it's sensing. We are the first company to bring data center class inference, the really large neural networks that today you see running only in the cloud, to run those on this tiny chip that you're seeing here without the use of external memory, without the use of external processing. And so we can make the gadgets that you interact with a whole lot smarter than they've been in the past.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And now we'll have Tom from Aspinity.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Tom Doyle. I'm CEO and co-founder of Aspinity. We're a machine learning startup here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And our focus is really, I mean, Patrice and I think Chris and the others set it up well. We're seeing this dramatic move to these smart home devices. You see the growth numbers. We see them as well. And our main focus is how do we enable the next generation of these devices to operate on battery power? And that's extremely challenging since these are always on devices. They're always gathering this data in the home. And we need to process it locally, both from the standpoint that it's just, it's difficult to put all that data into the cloud, but also from a security perspective, we want to be able to control that information and maintain it and use it for our capabilities, not to go to the cloud. And so we want to be able to decide what leaves the home from a data perspective. But when we look a little bit deeper into what's happening at this notion called edge processing or edge sensing, we see a lot of waste with regards to a lot of data that's gathered and processed, digitized and processed. And so we bring a new semiconductor solution. We call it analog machine learning. So it's a machine learning. It's capable of doing inferencing and detecting things like glass break and speech and vibrational changes. But we do that within analog. And the reason that's important is all of the sensed data is naturally analog. And today's technologies take 2 extra steps that they don't need to. They digitize that data and they look at it inside of a digital processor. Now that's a lot of power that's consumed, and at the end of that processing, you find out that the data is irrelevant, and that's where the waste comes in. And so what we're able to do is turn those high-powered devices off, typically in the milliamp range, and use our analog ML core called RAMP to be able to process that sound data, that vibration data, that bio data, and draw an inference and then wake up the system and either send that data on or alert somebody. One example I want to give you that will be coming out soon in some of our customers' products is this idea of glass break, and that was mentioned earlier by Patrice. That's an audio analytics application. So we can actually detect glass breaks with just us and an analog mic, and doing that at such low power allows that to last for multiple years on battery operation versus 3 months as we're seeing today with the current technologies out there. So our device is called RAMP. We're a machine learning paradigm. We eliminate really that high power processing that people are typically used to today. And we make a very easy to program machine learning model that can be easily deployed into products today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tom. All right, so now we will go right ahead into our panel discussion. And for the first question, I do want the audience to participate as well. So just head on over to your live discussions tab and answer that poll question that says, in what industries are we seeing the most progress with AI use cases? And we have options including security, home automation, healthcare, independent living, and energy and water management. So I want to turn this to the panel because we've talked a lot today about just the potential for the use of AI across a number of different industries, right? But of course, we haven't exactly seen a lot of that progress. You know, we haven't seen it manifest itself in a lot of industries as the promises that we've highlighted today. So in what industries are you seeing the most progress with innovative AI use cases?
Well, I guess
let's start with Mitchell, since he's in the top cube. All right, but it seems like we don't have Mitchell's audio. Mitchell, can you unmute yourself?
I've been unmuted. Let's see. Well, I should say
Perfect.
unmuted.
Perfect.
Okay, sorry. As I had stated before, you know, we're basically building the silicon that enables devices to communicate with each other. We're definitely seeing the rapid adoption in security. A lot of that has already been spoken to, and certainly our friends over at Alula can speak to that directly. I think in terms of the home automation space, we're starting to see that, and I think that the way it's going to increase its visibility is little by little. It's going to be a gradual thing. You know, in the example that Rick gave earlier in terms of thermostats, you know, people have become pretty comfortable now with a thermostat beginning to learn your patterns. And by adding additional sensors around the house, it can learn your patterns with different rooms and areas like that. So the next natural step, of course, in the home side would be contextual awareness, whereby an individual could walk into a room and using their voice say, turn the lights on, and just make a general statement. But the system with the various sensors and smart devices at that point would understand that, okay, we know what time it is. We know what time of year it is. We know where you are within the city. And it would then turn on the appropriate lights for that particular room. And as you walk into the next room, you can also say, turn the lights on, let's say in the kitchen. And again, that would be a different experience, which it would not affect the other areas of the house. So that, again, home automation, I think, is the area we're going to see the next big area of growth.
Home automation, wonderful. All right, let's hear from Dave.
Okay, thanks, Patrice. Yeah, I just wanted to comment. AI is a technology, and consumers adopt technology when you deliver value around that technology. And I guess I would argue we are seeing adoption of it already in the security space, as was just mentioned, home automation and security. And in the security world, it's in video, it's object detection. It's recognizing not just that I saw something happen with a camera, but I saw a specific thing. It's a vehicle, it's a person, it's an animal. Those are things that are already delivering processing of data to deliver more value to the consumers. And adoption of any technology comes when you start to deliver that value around it. In our world, we're in the professional security industry. Our job is to make sure the professional dealers can bring value to their customers. And with multiple technologies, multiple ways that it's adopted, having that expert there is key. But then to be able to be cost effective with that, you have to remotely manage that. And so proactive monitoring of these devices so that our professional partners can actually see something that might be going wrong, see something that could bring additional value to their customers, and do that on a proactive basis is another area that we're starting to see adoption of this. So I think in the world of video, you see it. In the world of automation that was just mentioned by our friends over at Z-Wave, we're starting to see more around energy management. And then in proactive monitoring of these systems and technologies, discovering of new devices, all of these are really key in helping bring value back to consumers and make sure that they continue to adopt these technologies. So I think it is going to be gradual. It's already happening, and it's all about taking technology and turning that technology to connect to people's lives that really drive adoption.
I would probably add that, one of the, and agree with regards to what was said before, I'll add one thing. I mean, we've seen tremendous, and it's been a very short time, tremendous growth in hands-free, voice-first devices, right? So, and this happens in the home, and I think everybody's becoming very accustomed to it, and it's only going to expand. And what we're seeing is these devices being able to control everything from just creating a grocery list, which seems very convenient, to the point of controlling your TV, controlling different, your dishwasher, your microwave, all hands-free. And I think that opens up a whole new door of devices that are coming out, that are spread throughout the home. And so, there is that piece that we have to be very careful of maintaining that data in the home, but the idea that it's just expanding, and we're seeing the numbers show that as well. But that's a huge area, and voice is a very challenging paradigm to deal with from a sensor standpoint and extracting intelligence from. And so that's one of the big areas I would add that's seeing a lot of growth with regards to AI.
So it sounds like everyone's saying home automation. Is that your thought as well, Steve?
I do indeed think it's home automation. I'd like to pick up on something that Mitchell said at the beginning
Sure.
of this, which is contextual awareness and the value of contextual awareness. I think, one does see this in security. I do think the rise is in home automation. But to achieve that contextual awareness requires a level of sophistication we haven't seen in the edge devices to date. I mean, today, the stuff that tries to do home automation, you have two bad choices. You either have something that's sending all of your data to the cloud, which violates your privacy and is expensive and so on, or you have something that can just recognize a few keywords and that's all it can do. If you really want to have contextual awareness, you need not only to support voice, but vision as well and other sensors as well, so that the chip in your house, without sending data off to somebody else's cloud, can understand its overall context and enrich your experience. And I think that change is only now starting to happen, and I think that's going to facilitate a next wave of home automation.
Great.
Yeah, Dave,
Thank you.
let me just jump on that and agree with it. And I think where we are right now with the smart home is that we make the decisions in terms of what to engage and what devices to engage in the home. And we are gradually making the case where decisions will be made for you. We're not
Method
there.
advice. Got it. All right, so I do have the results here for the poll question, so I'll run through them real quickly. So the majority, which is 39%, believe it's security where the biggest or the strongest progress will be. And then energy and water management. Actually, no, healthcare comes second with 22%. So it's security, then healthcare, and then there's a tie for technical support and endpoint security, as well as energy and water management. And then interestingly, independent living was last with only 4%. All right, so I guess progress hasn't really been made there because there's certainly a lot of potential for applications in independent living. All right, and with that, I will move to our second question, which is, now what is the biggest challenge with rolling out these new AI solutions? So we've talked about the potential and we've talked about, progress. Not all industries are making as much progress as others. So what do you think then are the biggest challenges that are holding back those industries that haven't made as much progress? And let's kick that off with Steve.
So I think there are many challenges, but the two biggest ones, in my view, are one, getting trustworthy enough data and enough of it to be reflective of the kind of phenomena you're trying to model so that you can build devices you can trust. And then the second is having enough horsepower to be able to do the right thing so that if you're going to trust a gadget to make decisions for you, it damn well better do the right thing to deserve that trust from you. I think those are the two issues, data and enough horsepower that you can trust as a result.
You have to be able to trust that. Okay, Tom, what do you think?
So as I mentioned earlier, our focus is on doing edge processing and doing it very efficiently. And we've seen tremendous growth in these devices in the home. And what we're seeing now in some of the biggest growth areas are those that are battery operated. So for us, the challenge is how do we have always on sensing, processing all of this sound data, this vibration data, this bio data all the time, 100% of the time, waiting for a very sporadic event to happen, like a glass break. It's extremely challenging, and that is, from a power perspective and longevity on battery, that's a huge challenge because in the future, not every device in the home is going to be able to be near a plug and plugged in, not to mention the fact that we want to have many, many devices in the home. And so that's really a large challenge that we're hearing from many of our customers.
Okay. And what do you think, Mitchell?
Well, no question, Tom, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of discussion about what to do with the data, but the question is, how are you collecting that data? And that data, of course, is coming from sensors. And yes, of course, sensors are going to have to be run on battery. And on the Z-Wave side, sure, we can run a coin cell battery for, we're estimating roughly 10 years, and adding in your technology on top of that, that will enable us to deploy all the sensors we're going to need to be able to deliver the data we need, whether it be dropping sensors into a wall to determine whether or not there's mold building up inside your exterior of your building and things like that. So I think that's going to enable a much wider assortment of sensing. Again, going back to what Rich was talking about earlier on, and be able to take things outside of the obvious, what's the temperature, what's the lighting, where are you located in the house, be able to tell you things about your home and about the exterior of your home that normally would not be readily available.
Interesting. And what about you, Dave? You have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I look at, there's challenges around interoperability. There's multiple technologies coming from different providers, and if anybody thinks I'm going to control all the devices that are going into a home and take that data and deliver value out of it, and it's coming from one company, I think I think that's naive. I think we're now in the stage where there's multiple systems coming from multiple channels, and we have to be able to extract data, and then, not to sound like a broken record, but then delivering that data into something that brings value to consumers, whether it's the health of the home, whether it's providing better convenience or better ways to manage their life and their daily activities. That's going to be the key. So we can spend a lot of time looking at the possibilities, and I think we need to extract that into things that are going to drive value. But interoperability is a key area. We're working to make sure, and I think the more connected devices, there's a lot of cloud integrations that can happen that can drive increased interoperability. And then starting to demonstrate how that interoperability can improve the overall experience of all these different subsystems for the consumer is really going to be key. And we're starting to see that shift move right now.
Interesting. So a pretty big mixed bag of answers, I think. But what about, just bare bones, the cost to the manufacturer? Is cost an issue? Because I'm getting a sense that, AI, building a lot of these AI, into our products and maintaining them and keep, developing them and refining them to where they're very accurate can be a pretty costly, endeavor, especially for a startup. So, and of course, a lot of innovation in a lot of these spaces are oftentimes driven by startups. So would anyone say that's probably a real barrier to progress right now?
Yeah, let me just jump on that, if that's okay. And
Sure.
just Dave's comment on interoperability. We all know that Z-Wave has always mandated that interoperability in order to certify your product and get into the marketplace. And that's great, but it really is required across different platforms. And there will be some announcements being made next year, just to pique your interests. And there are definitely some initiatives way to establish interoperability between different platforms. To go directly to your question about the cost, that cost of development goes way down once you have interoperability, or once you decide to develop on a platform that is interoperable, where you don't have to build the entire end-to-end devices, and you can actually focus on one. So that's really what is going to drive down the cost.
Okay, interesting.
The other thing, if I can add, is that it is in fact possible, as the technologies for machine learning advance, it is in fact possible to build very small silicon that can do very serious stuff. Both the analog voice chip from Dave and the digital chip from us doing vision are both very, very small chips. So while consumer electronics is very price sensitive, in fact the technology exists already today, I think, to provide highly cost sensitive solutions.
All right.
Yeah, just building on that, if I could, I mean, cost is coming down, and it's coming down from, smartphones are using a lot of chips that are driving down the cost of microphones, and we can get more audio in. Cameras are rolling out in very cost-effective ways, and all of these have processing power, and I think we're becoming smarter about leveraging distributed processing, doing more at the edge, but we also have the cloud where we can take additional data and do more analytics behind that. And it's going to be a combination of edge detection and decision making, so you get less information in the cloud, so you can be more cost effective in processing and making decisions in the cloud. So that's the trend we're seeing. It's kind of this hybrid approach of, it went from take everything up to the cloud and make decisions, which can get costly, to let's only take the things that really matter. And I think as we get more processing capabilities just through volume of smartphones and cameras and smart speakers and all the devices that are driving silicon that we all need to make AI decisions, is really helping to drive adoption and keep the costs lower.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could, I'll add on to what even Steve said as well, right? So we're down in the enablement space, and we're building silicon to help these next generation of devices. They're actually more efficient, right? And so efficiency drives costs down. And then as they scale up as well, you'll see costs driving down. But we definitely feel, from the customer standpoint, how do we deal with this data earlier? And I think Dave even mentioned this. The earlier you deal with the data and make a decision, then you get more efficiency in the entire signal chain. And so that's gonna drive some of that expense out of it as well. And we'll see more things combining to drive that out.
And that's a great point. Just to pick up on that for a second, I think Tom's point is really important, that the use of the cloud for so much of this data processing is quite expensive, and much of that expense is being saved. That's exactly the point Tom's making, and that's absolutely true. And it's a huge source of cost that might be underappreciated, that actually makes these edge solutions less expensive than the ones used in the cloud. So.
Okay, great. So our audience has also answered this question. So let me share with you what our audience is saying. So interestingly, 54%, a good little majority, says it's developing the models that is the biggest challenge here. And then we have 19% saying it's poor data quality. That's the biggest barrier. We have 15% saying it's reliability and testing that's holding us back. And then we have, I guess, access and data, marketing, selling, support needs are all sort of falling to the bottom here with 4% apiece. So interestingly, the audience think developing the models is the biggest challenge. And I know we did have a question about that where, we wanted to talk about the different tools that are emerging that are really just designed. It's like developer tools that are designed to sort of help those that don't have the capabilities in-house, et cetera, to really build these build AI models that can really work and really facilitate that development. Do you see those tools then as really helping to drive AI development and AI use cases in the smart home forward? And this is feeding off what the audience says, because they think developing the tools is the biggest problem here.
I think it's less about the tools themselves. I think there's plenty of capabilities to develop tools. It's what problem are you trying to solve? And that's probably what the audience's response is we can get the data and we can do things with the data. And there's plenty of examples where that exists. It's now, how are you turning that into something that's, what problem are you trying to solve by doing that? And there were some good examples on, home maintenance and being able to observe things that are happening in the home and then take proactive action, whether it's appliance maintenance or foundation maintenance or whatever it happens to be. I think the technology to build the models and to work with the data exists. There's plenty of engineers and capabilities around that. It's now turning it into something that is tangible and can be brought back to that consumer in a meaningful way. I think we're starting to get it, and I think video is one where there's been some great examples of, don't show me everything that's going on in a home, but show me the things that I really care about. And those models are effective and they're working, and it's a combination of edge and cloud, and you're seeing adoption and value behind it. And that's one example that I could put out there to say the models exist. And now there's a tangible use case behind it that people want and adopt. And I think that's what we're going to see evolve over the next couple of years.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dave. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Will these models really work?
So I mean, I think, that's exactly what we do. I mean, we develop machine learning models that run on our proprietary core that it's very difficult. I think the challenge, yes, the models will work. I think the challenge is the training data and accessing the training data. So we see two different camps, right? So we gather our own data, develop our own models. So we have a glass break model that runs on our core that we developed and trained and people can test with. We have a voice detection model as well, an alarm detection model, and many others. But we also enable customers, because data is everything, to be honest with you. So many times customers want to access a core like ours, but they want to train the model themselves. And so it's really access to the data that I think drives it, because that's data that the customers collected or others collected that's actually proprietary in nature, can give you a real edge. And so I think that's part of the puzzle there as well, is how do we get the right data to develop the model? And I laugh about it because I have machine learning data science on my team, and I can tell you their job is never done. They're always tweaking something. It goes on forever. So I kind of laugh about that. I think it's funny.
Yeah, I think the reality is that it's going to be extraordinarily difficult for any company to build the complete end-to-end product. And you're going to have to be finding the appropriate enablement partners, like the folks here on this panel, in order to be able to deliver on the promise of AI.
I have exactly the same view. I basically, building these models is rocket science, but rocket scientists exist who know how to do that. And so the thing to do is partner with rocket scientists who actually have those models and know how to build those models, and that's the way to solve it, rather than solving the end-to-end problem by yourself. I agree with the other panelists' comments.
Yeah, great. Just to add one more, I think you mentioned the tools. I mean, I think there's a lot of large companies that are developing machine learning tools out there, right? I don't even need to mention them, but you can build all kinds of models. It's then targeting those models towards different cores that you want to choose. And I think many of the folks on this call have different cores that people use, and I see them using all the time, right? So, I mean, I think the tools are there. I think you're finding interfacing to those tools that's developing and making it easier and better for everybody.
Got it. So then what would you say then are some of the most important lessons that have been learned from those AI solutions that have been previously brought to market? What are the biggest lessons that we learn as we strive to develop more reliable and better and more innovative use cases?
Well, certainly a theme you're hearing from all four of us is that data is king. That if you want to build something, a model you can trust, to build a product you can trust, you have to have representative enough data that captures the phenomenon you're trying to capture. I also think clarity of what problem you're trying to solve, as a couple of the panelists have mentioned, is another of the challenges, making sure you're solving the right problem that will make the system context aware enough to do the right thing.
Great. Did anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Choose the right ecosystems, I guess. At this point in time, you still have to make that decision in terms of where you want to deploy your product and how you want to deploy it. So in addition to finding the right enablement partners, you've got to decide where you actually want to get your product into, and then make sure you're choosing the right platform or ecosystem to work with.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think tool chain is very important, and also the product application and those requirements. I mean, we have so many. Remember, we're moving from the cloud, right? That's where a lot of the original AI existed, and we're moving that to the edge. And you just can't bring one of the high power cores that was in the farm in the cloud and put it in an edge device, right? So it really is picking and choosing the different suppliers and what you're trying to do. Is it battery operated? Is it not battery operated? What size of a model are you expecting? How extensive of a detection are you trying to do? And our customers look at that all the time. I'm trying to first detect this and then look at the data deeper on this and then go to the cloud. So there's a staging, if you will, that's happening, and we see that all the time.
Great. Thanks. All right, so let's talk about how AI will evolve then. I mean, we've already mentioned a lot of the use cases that exist, and we talked about home automation also being probably the area that will have the strongest development and make the greatest progress in the near term. So let's talk about how AI should evolve or how it will evolve. We know that the level of automation preferences, consumers are very different as it relates to their preferences for automation. And we tend to think that, the best automation experience is complete automation, where our products, sort of determine for us what's next, or, our products automatically know what we want to do next and sort of go ahead and take those actions on our behalf. But we know that not everyone is going to be comfortable with that. We know that different consumer profiles do like a different level of control. Some want full automation, some want you to ask me first before you take a particular action. So how will this all evolve is what I'm asking.
And if I could lead off real quick, Patrice, with, I like to look at how AI has evolved. And I'm going to use a smart speaker as an example. And we have, Alula has an interface to that. But the smart speaker was introduced into the market largely as an entertainment device. It could play music. And there was an AI engine that evolved in observing the type of music, the type of things, the type of podcasts that people like. It started to learn different voices and know that it's me versus my wife, and it would play content. If I asked it to say, hey, play music, it would suddenly start to play what I wanted as opposed to what my wife or my kids would want. And that's an evolution of AI. That's an AI engine that's happening. And I know it's sharing my data, and I know what's going on behind the scenes, but I'm willing to give that data up because it's bringing value back to me. So that's an example of how AI has evolved. And so I think it's present in people's lives, and something that it continually uses data to deliver more and more refinement that brings value and entertainment to me. And that's one example. Some of the things we're doing, again, we're leveraging observations of data to help our customers manage their business more effectively. As more connected devices get out in the marketplace, you need to, again, bring value and keep your costs low. And so we actually are doing more behind the scenes. It's less to go to the consumer and more to go to the pro to say, what's happening with all my customers? Are they still happy? Are they using their system? What are they doing that's different? And how can I make sure I continue to deliver value? And that's an example of leveraging AI, but it evolves over time, and it refines itself based on continued observation of data. And I think that's what's going to continue to happen as we roll forward.
All right. Mitchell, did you have any thoughts on how automation will play out in the home?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of it really depends on the comfort level of people, like they've said. You know, we've grown accustomed to a certain AI, like on Netflix, where it'll suggest where your next binge watch should be, or Spotify, where your next songs to add to your playlist should be. And so we're gradually getting to the point where even, you know, serving up advertisement that are specifically geared to things you've looked at before on the website, you know, on your Chrome platform. So we're getting to the point where I think consumers are starting to get comfortable with how AI can help them. And obviously, this is going to have to take it to the next level, but and it's kind of where I see it going.
Good. I want all thoughts on this. Tom, what do you see? Where do you see us drawing the line with automation?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think for what we've seen, I agree with Dave. I mean, it's been tremendous change and growth. I mean, even from us, you know, deep technology guys, it's just amazing how they change. But you know, what I see happening in the future, especially with the smart home, I see the vast majority of the data collected staying in the home. And I see it getting processed more efficiently in the home and decisions being made locally as well, which is much different than today because we have too much data that's going out of the home and into the cloud. And that's not just from a security perspective, although it is one, it is also an efficiency perspective. So if you think about condition monitoring, how's my equipment in my home, or you think about the alarms or, you know, the glass break, these are all very sporadic, random events that you never know when they're going to happen. And so you have to process them all the time. And so that's why the efficiency has to continue to drive. And I just see it continuing. There's so much technology that's coming out. And we've talked about some on this call from the people on the panel. And so I think you'll see just that data being processed on the edge at the locality is just going to be a huge change in the next 5 years.
So we're going to continue to see a lot of automation, and we all are just going to have to get accustomed to our products doing everything for us and enjoy that life.
It doesn't have to be doing everything for us. I think there are levels of automation, and that's what needs to be appreciated. I don't want my home automation system to tell me what I want for dinner. I want to decide what I want for dinner. On the other hand, when I tell the oven to go to 375 degrees, I don't decide which specific relays inside the oven turn on. It decides what relays turn on. All I said was 375 degrees. So there are levels all the way up. Everybody's comfortable when I turn the knob on my oven that the oven figures out how to make the oven do the oven thing. So I don't think one needs to abdicate one's identity in order to have automation play a role in one's life. I think there will be levels at which you get to decide where sometimes it's okay that it make the decision for me, but often I'll decide at a very high level what I want to have happen. But all the stuff underneath that, which requires context and intelligence after a fashion, it can do automatically. So it doesn't have to be, a brave new world or whatever.
Well, Steve, it may not want it to tell you what you want for dinner, but it might want to say, hey, here are some suggestions based on the things you've typically been eating and so on and so forth. So AI doesn't necessarily have to make the decisions, but I think you can make some intelligent, suggestive decisions.
I think the other thing that I would add to what Steve said is, I don't care if everything's okay, so don't even tell me. I want to know when something's wrong. And too often I use, kind of the fitness watches that are always processing, telling you, hey, here's your heart rate, here's your heart rate. I don't really care. I want to know when my heart rate's bad if I need to do something about it. And I think it's that flip of information to say, look, if my air conditioning in my home is working fine, great. 2 years, 8 years, I don't care. But the minute something starts to go bad, I want to know about it and then take action. So don't bother me until then. And I think that's what all of this automation is doing is monitoring much better than a human can, right? Solid-state electronics is very good at picking up the earliest instance of a problem versus the human ear. So it's very interesting what's going on. And I agree with Steve on that.
So it sounds like we're going to have alerts by exception, and then we're going to also have a suggestion-based sort of automation. And I agree with that too. I think that's a pretty good middle ground. Instead of, going ahead and doing everything for me, make recommendations. Make recommendations based on my patterns, which is kind of what I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And then give me that final step to say, yes, go ahead and launch the particular action. All right, interesting. So now that we're talking about how AI and innovation in the home will evolve, I think a good segue would be, it's actually a good segue into, I try to identify what do we think are the current pain points in the home that could basically benefit from some AI, or what are the current pain points in the home that could use AI, to make homeowners' life easier, more convenient, or anything.
I would make the jaundiced observation that all products are bad, and the hope is by having more contextually aware objects that the experience of using them can be better. An example I often trot out is most of us have microwave ovens, and the microwave ovens have 100 buttons on them, and none of us knows how to use them. What's supposed to happen is when I walk up to my microwave oven and I've got broccoli in my hand, the microwave should be looking at me and say, "Oh, look, it's Steve, and he has broccoli in his hand, and I know how he likes his broccoli cooked. I'll sit myself to do the right thing." Just so basically, to make the user experience of interacting with gadgets have less sort of friction than it has currently, by having the objects be a little bit more aware of what's going on around them.
Okay.
I think we're going to follow. You had earlier a presentation of adoption of different technologies, and it had, the thermostat is the highest adoption, and so on. And honestly, I think the solutions that we build, that we add intelligence to, are going to be driven by the devices and the technologies that consumers are adopting. With thermostats being the most active, it's going to be built around, kind of energy management. How can I optimize that instead of programming it where it's confusing? Just follow my normal routine, which I guess in the world of pandemics, nobody has a normal routine anymore. But it's a great example of if you had a program schedule based on, I used to leave to go to work, now I'm not leaving to go to work, and it can automatically adjust that schedule. That's a perfect example of gaining adoption based on, market adoption of technology. It can communicate, it's already connected, and now you can observe other things like I'm no longer going into the office, and so adjust my schedule for me. That brings value to the customer, and it's a wider adoption in the market. So I think we're going to really see investments made in technologies that are already there in homes and have already been deployed, and then building value around it, given kind of the new world that we're living in.
I think that's a very good point, and it's definitely a very, pragmatic approach to development. But I think that comes back now to, I think it was Rich who was making the point in the earlier presentation about developing technology for the sake of technology. So it's like we constantly, that's kind of where we find ourselves a lot lately. And it's like, okay, well, we need to go back to the home and look into the home and see where the real pain points are, where we can create real value, and that's probably what's going to drive the adoption versus, looking at our technology capabilities and say, okay, where can we build on to these capabilities? So, I see your point, and that's a very, pragmatic approach. But I also see what, the point that Rich was making, and there's kind of a sort of a different approach there, and both of them have their benefits. Any other thoughts on that, by the way? What are the current pain points in the home that could really benefit from driving from AI to create value for consumers?
Often it's the product itself, like Steve had mentioned, the products that are either confusing to use, or they break, or they don't work, or they become irrelevant, or, as we've also seen, certain brands that end up bricking products whereby you've just invested a fair amount of time and now all of a sudden the product doesn't work. And then the surprise subscription that shows up that your product really isn't worthy until you have this subscription. And this kind of plays into the cloud access that's been discussed before. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of them, but I think we can even look right at the products and see where certain pain points are going to have to be addressed.
the products themselves. All right. I think we can start going to our audience questions now. I did see a question come in earlier. If not, I'll continue going through my questions. Nope, I'm not seeing them here anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back to my questions first, and then we'll go back to the to my messaging here to see if the audience questions pop up. All right, so we talked a little bit about power requirements earlier, and we did mention that, you know, the power requirements will actually factor into our ability to develop a lot of these industries. And we also mentioned, you know, processing in the cloud versus processing, you know, at the edge, and just mentioning that that is really going to impact, you know, how we move forward. So my other question is, and real quick, because we do see audience questions popping up now, how is the battery and power requirement hindering our ability to bring AI solutions to market? So real quick answers on that, and then we can go back over to our audience questions.
I mean, for us, I mean, that's a huge area for us, and we really focus hard on that, right? So what we find in talking with different customers is they're designing with, you know, the current paradigm in mind, right? So they know that there's limits to how long they can last on battery power. And so, I mean, for us, I mean, we're bringing a new type of solution out that really substantially lowers battery power for these always on, always sensing devices. I mentioned glass break. If you think about that, you know, the way that we're processing all of that sound data 100% of the time, every day, because you never know when someone's going to break your window, that's extremely inefficient way to do it. And so when we do that very successfully in analog, and shut down some of those higher order components, we're starting to see really significant battery improvement to the tune of 10, even in some cases, depending on the application, 40, 50x improvement in battery power.
Yeah, we have the same view. We too are extremely power sensitive, and making it possible to do in milliwatts what you used to use a data center to do image processing and really sophisticated inference. The requirement for low power to enable the edge is fundamental. I totally agree with them.
Yeah, and at Silicon Labs, that's a very key focus for all the different platforms. So yeah, we are addressing them.
All right. So this first question here seems like it was stemming from when we were talking about the cost of products and you know, whether or not AI would drive the cost and how the chipset affects that. So it says, what sort of dollars can we expect these edge chipsets to be for a low cost device? Where is it headed? So what kind of dollars what kind of cost can we expect these edge chipsets to be for a low-cost device? All right, this sounds like
you lost me. Sorry.
It sounds like a perceived question. Did you understand the question, Steve? If not, I will.
I did. So you know, okay. I'm reluctant to quote prices in a forum like this. What I'll say is, it was mentioned before, and I very much agree. In fact, the price of these edge solutions that we're bringing, and certainly it's true of ours, but I think it's true more broadly, are sufficiently low that it's actually less expensive to use us at the edge than it is to use the cloud, given all the cloud costs that you have to spend to rent storage in the cloud and to use computation in the cloud and so on. So rather than think of it in the absolute number of dollars, I would think of the relative number of dollars. It's actually more cost effective to use an edge solution than it is to use a cloud solution if the edge can do the heavy lifting, which solutions like ours can do.
I'd just like to comment if I could. I mean, so, you know, again, being in the professional security industry, we have decent volume in our market, but it's not along the lines of consumer electronics volumes that you'd see with, again, smartphones and smart speakers and other devices. But we're finding now we're able to leverage technologies and leverage that consumer electronic volume to get more edge processing down there. So you can get a lot of sensors and devices that are, you know, well under $100 for a completed product, touchpads on the walls, again, voice enunciation systems, sensing technologies. All of these things are coming down in cost largely because we're able to leverage technologies used in other markets and now adapt them into our specific markets and applications. And then with interoperability and cooperation, both at the edge with standards that are emerging, whether it be Z-Wave or other standards that have emerged, as well as more cooperation with manufacturers and service providers for cloud interactivity, where we can start to share data that's observed through different subsystems. All of those things are helping keep the costs low, so adoption will grow pretty rapidly.
Got it.
I would just second, what Steve and Dave kind of talked about, and you have to think about the system and the bill of materials as well. And in many of these devices, I mean, number one, by adding a new chip or a new type of technology, you're adding more value, right? So there's value there. But at the same time, for things like our solution, we're helping customers reduce power, which could change battery size. And we have examples of, customers going from supplied lithium batteries down into customer supplied AAA batteries, right? So it changes the whole dynamic from a cost perspective. And that's kind of the discussions that we have with customers with regards to cost and changing their architecture.
Got it. All right. So our next question is, can AI replace or just supplement human-based pro monitoring? I think Dave would probably want to take that first.
I do supplement. I mean, any of this stuff, it's been brought up before. Suggestive, here's what I've observed. Would you like me to take this action? Or here's some things that you might like. I think for at least over the next handful of years, it's going to be augmenting the direct interactive controls, but adding more value behind it. So instead of just being a remote control, now there's suggestions behind it, or you might be able to say, I've noticed you've changed your patterns. Would you like me to adjust your home accordingly? And I think that's the mode it's gonna take. I'd be interested in what other panelists feel though.
I mean, I think I'd alluded to it earlier, but the ability to use sensors and electronics is on par with the human sensory system. I mean, we're the most efficient when it goes to analyzing sound data and using that, but we can't be everywhere, right? So if we can get very close to replicating the system that we use for auditory perception and analysis and put that throughout the home, throughout the factory, wherever, to monitor for that first identification of a problem, right? That's where I think it really adds a lot of value. So we're the best, but we can't be everywhere.
I think this is about levels of abstraction. I made this comment before. This isn't black and white. The computer does everything. The computer does nothing. There are logical places, depending on the task, where you want the system to engage, whether that's making a suggestion at a relatively high level, or simply when I say turn on the lights, that the lights automatically turn on because it recognizes my voice. I think it's up to us as consumers to choose at what level of interaction we want to be to preserve our level of autonomy and control that facilitates our lives. This isn't being dictated to us by the underlying technology.
All right, Steve, you might as well stay on here. This next question goes to you and Tom. It says, how many concurrent models can the edge processors support?
In our case, there isn't a preset limit. It's simply a matter of what will fit in the memory that's on the part. We don't use any external memory, but we routinely run 4 or 5 models at once, and there's nothing intrinsic about 4 and 5. That's just in practice where we find ourselves tending to be. But we can, in fact, do multiple things at once.
Yeah, and the same for us. So we have our RAM chip comes in different sizes, right? Think of ARM core, think of something else. We're all analog, by the way, but it really depends on the model or models and the size of the chip that you target for those. And so it's pretty much the same. We don't use memory. We're asynchronous. We have no clocking. We're purely time domain, time series processing, all within analog. But we can process. I mean, our chip that we're releasing out to customers now can take in 4 sensors. So it's also about taking in all different kinds of data and have 8 individual processing paths at the same time with 8 possible neural network outputs. So it's pretty extensive with what it can do, and it's really dependent on the application, the customer, and the model that you want to develop.
All right, thanks. Okay, so this next question sounds like it's stemming from when we were talking about notifications and alerts by exception. So it reads, so how do you decide what's worth knowing and what's not? You know, when is a leak not a leak?
I think, I'll open with at least what we've seen in video, and adding object detection in that. Some of it comes down to preference settings of the customer or the user. Here's things I want to know about. I don't want to know, when a flag is blowing on my front step, but I do want to know when there's a person standing there, or I want to know, when a package arrived and if it left. Those are things that are meaningful to me, and you can kind of configure that. Now you've told the engine what to look for. You've told the AI what to look for, and you can get notifications. And I think short term, that's how we're seeing it adopted. And I think over time, it'll depend on the application. Independent living, I want a change in behavior. I want to know if my mom or my dad has changed their movement patterns, or if they've fallen, and you can, you'll start to set it up by application. So it'll be kind of defaults based on what you're trying to observe, along with preferences. And I think that's how we've seen it adopted, and probably will for the next handful of years.
All right, any final thoughts on that?
I agree with Dave. I mean, and I think the other side of that is, when you're thinking about condition monitoring, you get equipment, you buy equipment that goes in your house. We're seeing more manufacturers add the sensing in there. And, just to give you, we know that in rotating machinery that have bearings, there's definitely fault indicators on those bearings. And so those are preset. We know what they are. And so, that's programmed with the manufacturer. And I think in the other cases, as Dave mentioned, they're set by the consumer or the user on what they want to do.
Great. Thank you, Tom. And that will have to be our last comment as I wrap up this panel discussion. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I thought this was a very insightful discussion. Thank you to the audience for the great participation with all those questions through this entire track. Thank you. And thank you to our sponsors, again, for making this event a reality. Please, I'd like to remind everyone that our networking sessions are about to get started right now. And if you scroll through your agenda right here, you will find some links that'll take you right to those Zoom meetings where those networking discussions will be held. So I'd like to thank everyone once again, and go ahead and enjoy the networking discussions. Bye-bye.